Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I couldn't uh, stream last week, but don't worry, I'm hoping to make it up for that by reading the last two tales in this series. And those tales are An Alchemist Goes to War and The Summer of Bad Memories. An Alchemist Goes to War. The director leads an MTF to pay Ledanov Technologies a visit. An old enemy resurfaces in an unexpected place. By Dr. Magnus. An Alchemist Goes to War. January 1st, 2018. 01:17:33 a.m. UTC, Toronto, Canada. Ruslov Dyagilev took a deep breath and closed his eyes, listening to the sounds of the universe around him. That and the clattering of the radios on his companion's vest. The 8 members of his personal departmental MTF sat in the back of a standard Foundation transport. Sir, are you sure about this? Agent Dumorn said. I have no objections to storming this place, but I'd rather not put you in danger. Agent Dumorn lifted his rifle, checking it for the 5th time since they left the site. I'm sure. Don't worry about me, Agent. I'm able to handle myself, Roslov said with a quiet smile. Agent Dumore squinted his eyes for a moment before shaking his head and looking at the other members of the assembled mobile task force. All right then, Oathkeepers, sound off. Ready status. Around the vehicle, around the transport vehicle, murmured Asset. Ascent was, murmured ascent was given one by one. The various, the various clacking of military doodads was their constant companion as the men and women of the mobile task force readied themselves for combat. Ruslov adjusted his own gear. Hands slipped over the pouches and pockets of his vest. Gone were the flowing green bo- uh, Gone were the flowing bottle green robes of elder mastery, replaced instead by sensible mottled gray fatigues. You requested this from the armory, right? Agent Moore said, offering a semi-automatic pistol to Ruslov. The captain looked hesitant to be handling the weapon to Ruslov, but relinquished it to his hands. Da, thank you, Captain. I don't have time to sign out a weapon myself. Ruslov ejected the magazine, checked for ammunition, before retracting the slide a quarter-inch to check for a round. He nodded the empty chamber and racked the slide, jamming around, placing the semi-automatic in the holster at his hip. Spare magazines? Agent Dumore handed over the 3 spare magazines that Ruslov had requested, which disappeared into the pouches on his belt. We're 2 clicks out. Let's go over the plan one more time, Agent Dumore said, leaning forward over the central console. Displaying on the touchscreen was a 3-dimensional map of 2732 Maple Garden Way, the secondary headquarters of Ledanov Technologies. According to the intel, this is where the assholes who made 3622 are holed up. The director requested we accompany him on a little sightseeing. Our orders are to cover the director as he ascends to the 13th floor and disables any potential threat from his department. Assuming everything is clear, we storm the 13th floor together and neutralize the threat. Agent Dumore tapped on the loading dock, and the image zoomed in. This is our only viable entrance. Amnestics are approved as necessary, but you're all aware of the level this is restricted to. Director, what kind of threat are we facing exactly? Roosevelt leaned forward and gestured, invoking the fulminous aether to manipulate the image slightly. He gestured to the entrance around the stairs. If this is who I think it is, there will be wards of water and earth here and here. Roosevelt gestured to the windows of the 13th floor. I suggest you do not look out the windows once we arrive on the floor. They are most likely warded as well. A knock came to the driver's cabin. 1 minute. Roosevelt nodded and drew forth the crozier to his right hand. If you encounter anything you feel is anomalous, do not hesitate to call me. Most likely there are alchemic constructs within the building. I would not suggest fighting them. Bullets may slow them down if they are corporeal. Aim center mass. The transport van pulled to a hard stop and the back door opened with a jolt. Agent Dumore flipped the tablet off and pulled the balaclava up and over his mouth, gesturing. The rearmost two engines slid into the darkness surrounding the office building, sweeping the area and gesturing to the rest of the team. Agent Dumore, Ruslav, and the other disembarked into a loose formation, striding with confidence towards the door. Weapons ready but not leveled. Ruslav drove a pistol from his left hip with a practiced motion and checked the safety, approaching the rear service entrance. Agent Dumore gestured at the nearest agent who knelt in front of the door, fitting a small device up against the lock of the service door. A few moments later, a soft click permitted them into the building. Overhead, lighting bathed the lobby in a soft yellow glow. The floors were a neutral white linoleum. The walls covered in marble-patterned green stone. The lights were low, the building mostly shut down for the night, except for a few people burning the midnight oil. 2 security guards sat at the nearby desk, looking bored. Neither of them had noticed the group of heavily armed agents slide in the back entrance, and Agent Dumore held a raised fist. With practiced ease, the MTF slid to their knees, and Ruslav heard Agent Dumore's voice in his earpiece. "Your call, Director. What do we do?" His voice was a barely perceptible growl picked up from his throat mic. Ruslav took 2 steps forward and gestured with his right hand, holding his crozier. The aqueous and erroneous aether swirled around the 2 guards, lulling them to an easy and deep sleep. We let them get a good night's rest. My knees are not what they were. Elevators? Suppressed chuckles emerged from the gathered agents as Agent Moore took the lead, fanning the men and women of the task force out over the lobby. Ruslav jammed the up button with the end of his crozier, humming quietly to himself. "So what exactly are we expecting up there?" Agent Dumore said, rechecking the various bits of havoc strapped to his frame. "I do not know. Probably something completely and needlessly dramatic. That's how the things always seem to go," Ruslav said, smiling slightly at the dull chime of the elevator car, announcing its arrival. The agent shuffled in the car. 2 members standing in the ground level to cover the exit. Ruslav jammed the button marked 13, and the soft muzak of the elevator encompassed them. The tense few seconds passed before the door chimed at the 13th floor. opening to reveal a solid steel security door directly in front of the elevator shaft. The doors to the elevator made a quiet, grinding noise and stuck open. Uzov raised an eyebrow as Agent Dumbour reached out to probe at the door in front of them. I'm not sure why this is here, but it doesn't seem anomalous. Is this your area, Director? Agent Dumbour asked politely, stepping back. Uzov stepped to the door and extended his senses, sensing nothing beyond the usual Fermius aether escaping the metal surface. No, but I can help either way. Stand back, please. The agents quickly pressed themselves against the back of the elevator as Rusov took a breath. His hands circled down and up until he ended with a quick rushing motion, dragging both the erroneous and igneous aethers with him, combining sharply on the other side of the door, causing a heavy backdraft, sucking the door out with his shoulder charge. The heavy metal door careened into the far wall, neatly cleaving awaiting Tyrannus ethereal construct in half. The heavy stone body of the entity fell in half with a heavy thud on the carpeted floor. Rosov blinked a few times and laughed quietly to himself. Well, that's convenient, I suppose. Agent Amor, you and one with me. The rest, sweep. The team stepped forward into the green and gray marbled elevator portico. Agent Demore nodded and split the team up, flanking the director along with two other agents as they approached the heavy glass doors to the office. Sensed the glass was the logo of the company, and the words Caveat Alchemitos hastily scrawled in Sharpie. Agent Demore pointed the writing. Is that Latin? Beware alchemists. Like I said, needlessly dramatic. Uzlov said, placing his hands on the door, which practically reverberated with the aethers contained within them. Illusion, misdirection. He turned his head and grimaced. I believe I know who's in there. On the other side of the door would be several Jingshi, I would imagine. Have you been briefed on them? Agent Demorn shook his head. Jingshi? Cliff notes. Roslov rolls his hands. Chinese vampires. Well, zombie might be more accurate. They have to move around. Do not let them touch you. Bullets do not work very well, unless you completely destroy them, or shoot their brain. If you have to, I would suggest shotguns or grenades. I believe at least one will be an alchemist. Not the strangest thing I've ever had to deal. Not the strangest thing I've ever had to deal with, I suppose. How do we do this? Can we just walk in? Agent Demore activated his microphone and radioed to the other members of the team. Two of them trotted back over and exchanged weapons with Agent Demore, and the others swapped the large caliber rifles with semi-automatic shotguns. Ruzlov shook his head and laid his hands on the door. A moment, I will deactivate his wards. As soon as I do, he will know we are here. Be ready. Ruzlov concentrated and pressed his senses deep into the grass, feeling the swirling and somehow sickly aethers trapped within. If the flows could make noise, there would be screaming. As he gently tugged on the loose flows, undoing the wards, after several moments he loosened it enough for them to be nothing more than a warning, and they stepped back. Ready? Demore nodded. Ready. Ruzlov pushed both his hands out with a swift draw the etheric of aether, water, and fire. A microscopic layer of ice formed inside the glass, immediately followed by a flash of fire, causing the glass to shatter. Spectacularly. Directed downwards and backed by gusts of wind blowing the shards of glass into the office. Ruzlov gestured forward, and the 4 Foundation members crossed the threshold. The moment they crossed the doorway, everything changed. The air grew thicker in an instant, and the sky visibly behind the windows changed from a black cityscape to a red and silver mass of stars and torchlight. In the distance, buildings teeming with beings from all across the universe. As Ruslav's senses immediately told him where they were. The office building itself hadn't changed. The desk in front of him still fusioned with post-its, monitors, computer equipment. Except for the alien skies and the change of dimension, it was the same as it was before. Alagada. This is worse than I expected. He slipped a hand off his crozier back onto his belt and took a step forward, his handgun in both hands. As the task force member tentatively followed him. What are you talking about, Director? Agent Morse said, his eyes widened slightly by the change of scenery, and his body language tensed. We are no longer on Earth, and I'm not sure that Ruzlov is cut off by a shrieking figure hopping from behind a desk, hands outstretched, yellow fingernails extended towards his face. In the blink of an eye, Ruzlov's hands blurred up, sending 2 rounds to the creature's chest, pulling a third through its head as he stepped forward, panting slightly. Buzz and Moy. They certainly woke me up a little. Everyone alright? Agent Moore stood slack-jawed at the reaction speed of the director, checking the body for movement before gesturing one of the agents to cover the exit. I have to admit, I didn't expect you to use the gun over alchemy. Ruzlov grinned and snapped his fingers, getting the body of the Jiangxi at their feet aflame. 6 of one, half a dozen of another. Whatever works. Ruzlov strode into the office, guns raised. Cover my back, please. The agents and Ruzlov continued walking forward, turning the corner of the main floor of the office. The lead agent dropped to one knee and let out a roar of a blast from her shotgun as another, the Jiangxi, leaped towards her face. She dropped prone as the creature continued its vector, now dead, and landed behind her. They repeated much of the same, encountering 2 more Jiangxi as they approached the wood-paneled door leading to an office at the back of the cubicles. I believe this is my department. Ladies and gentlemen, behind this door is our target. Please cover my back while I inquiry. Ruzlov said, placing the handgun back in its holster, dressing the crozier once more. Agent Dumore nodded and took a position near the door as Ruzlov walked up, placed both hands on the door, and pushed them open with just his own strength. The doors opened smoothly to reveal an elderly Chinese man sitting behind a desk. His hands twitching slightly, mostly extended in front of him. Behind his eyes were the weight of eons, as his face curled into a snarl of recognition. Diaglyph, I should have known you would never be satisfied with simply ruining my existence forever. Ruzlov sighed heavily and fixed his heavy-laden gaze upon the withered half-Jiangxi in front of him. Jiang Julao, I did not expect to find you here, but your misdirection was unmistakable. What brings you here, ghost? The ancient creature in front of him. The ancient creature in front of him rose. The joints of his elbows and knees cracked as he got to his feet. Freedom. The first greedy peasant who dug up my tomb put the ring on. On Gualao's left hand, a deep green jade ring glimmered under the lights. From there, it was only a few weeks before I wrestled control enough from Qin Shi, to pull enough energy together to create a portal to Alagada. Ruzlov nodded slightly. So far, all of this makes sense. You get free and immediately do the most obvious and cowardly thing. Run to Alagada. Did you immediately request the Scarlet King's aid? Offer him power, an agent perhaps, an introduction to the Leviathan? Ruzlov's voice grew progressively harsher as the memories of the past surfaced in his mind. Zhang Guolao's dry throat rasped with some horrid approximation of laughter. My master will no doubt be overjoyed when I return to Earth and present myself at its service once more. But no. An old mutual acquaintance of ours contacted me once I got here. Ruzlov spun his crozier in a slow vertical circle, the baffled cold iron making quiet whistling noise as it moved. Well, that confirms what I was suspecting, at least. By the way, I sealed your master on the bottom of the ocean almost 100 years ago. The Leviathan is effectively dead. I'm sure you noticed the lack of aethers flowing through the cosmos. Gyalao froze, his eyes narrowing as the baleful jade fire within the pupils guttled to spark. You are lying. Ruzlov shrugged and spun his crozier in a circle again. Come find out. You cannot exactly feel the flows from here, I would imagine. Even Seal, the Scarlet King, is putting off enough aether to blind anyone other than an elder. In fact, I'd be surprised if you could even form a portal at this point. Not that you were ever a particularly gifted alchemist, Zhang. Relying more on your reputation and skills with herbs than anything else. Guolao growled as his fingers moved with involuntary spasms. I will kill you for this. Return to Earth and destroy whatever remains of the so-called college, Guolao said, gathering the aethers around him. Ruzlov's eyes hardened. His mouth contorted into a tight line. There is no college, Guolao. Your scheme saw to that. I am here to help you, regardless of that. Ruzlov raised his crozier and pointed the heavy head at the wizened Jiangshi in front of him. I made a mistake in the past. What we did to you was wrong. But now, you need to come with me for containment. Gyalao's face contorted as the spirit of Qin Shi took over his body. Flying through the air towards Ruzlov, the director contorted his body, letting the ancient half-vampire fly past him, swinging the heavy metal of his crozier down on the creature's back. Listened to a shriek of pain as he struck the stored fulminous aether inside the heavy mace. As he struck, the fulminous aether inside the heavy mace tore its way free, streaking through Gallo's body, leaving it smoldering on the floor of the shearing heap. Well, I suppose we could do that instead," Wuzov said as the two task force members trained their guns with the prone form of the maleficent alchemist. Agent Moore gestured, and the other agent closed in, prodding the body with the toe of her boot. Gia Lao twisted like a serpent, drawing the agent in and pinning her against the desk, eliciting a shriek of protest from the trapped agent. He screamed aloud in Middle Chinese as He Kunshi forced him to draw out the life force of the MTF agent in his grasp. Ruzlov strode forward and drew together the erroneous aether, delivering a hard kick into the ribs of the agent, sending her careening down the hall in a gust of wind. Quincy hopped after her in one preternatural quick hop, before turning and streaking towards Agent Dumour. A roar of chemical fire shrieked out of Agent Dumour's shotgun as the buckshot tore into the flying form of Zhang Yulao. Alchemy and supernaturally strong muscles meant little in the face of physics, and the lightweight alchemist hit the floor hard, pouring blood from a ruined knee. He tried to raise to his feet, putting his weight on his good knee, as he rounded on Agent Moore, who was chambering the next round. Ruzlov took 2 bounding steps and gathered together in every flow he could. The aethers of fire, air, water, earth, metal, and electricity came willingly to his call. He reached inward to the luminous spirit that dwelt inside him, as he called for aid. "Master Alehian, help me." A quiet voice spoke back in a musing lilt. "Always." The aethers of space and time, gravity and magnetism came to their call, drawing the energies of the fabric of the universe together. A miniature sun formed in the hands of the furious director of the Foundation's Alchemy Department, as he slammed his hands together in a calamitous detonation. Gao Lao's head, shoulders, and upper body simply drifted away, the very force holding him together drawn into the micro-Terran reality that Ruzlov had formed. Every second itself, even sound itself, couldn't escape the terror, and everything in the office went silent for several moments. Agent Dumour kept his gun level, watching Ruzlov pant in the aftermath of the rapid combat. "Swathi, are you alright? Director, status?" Ruzlov nodded, swallowing hard as he caught his breath. "I'm fine. Do you have a containment box?" He reached out a hand, picking up his discarded crozier. Agent Dumour slapped a collapsible cube into Ruzlov's hands from the pack on his belt. He gingerly folded it around his fingers and drew the jade ring off of Gu Lao's finger, snapping a box closed at an electric hiss of vacuum. A quiet whoosh sound could be heard as chemically inert foam filled the interior. The containment foam would dissolve on contact with the chemicals back at the lab. Ruzlov snatched the small wooden box hanging from a string on the corpse's belt and wound the snapped thread through the small ring in one corner of the cube. He handed the device to Agent Dumour, who clipped the entire assembly to the back of his belt, snugging it tight with a bed of nylon webbing. "Let's go, Director. We already got at least one agent down. I'd rather not stick around." Agent Dumour strided forward to the prone form of his team member, checking for a pulse and letting out a sigh of relief. "Scratch that. One agent injured. Let's go." Ruzlov stepped forward and nodded, pulling a heavy cylinder off his belt. and handing it to Agent Dumorn. We shouldn't leave this place intact. Agent Dumorn nodded, slipping the tiny explosive discs out of his sleeve and tossing them to the corners of the office. He lifted the down agent to one shoulder and spoke quickly into his radio. A third agent came jogging up the center aisle and took the remaining charges, distributing them without preamble. They made their way back to the entrance, and Ruslov held up a hand. A moment. He moved his hands in a complicated weaving pattern, his fingertips moving as if making a cat's cradle. His eyes closed, and he drew in the luminous ethers collected in the electronics around him. He took in a breath, and the flows nearly overwhelmed him as he gathered together a storm in and around himself. His eyes flew open, and forked lightning manifested from the drawn ethers a few inches above his hands. He punched his right arm forward, hurling forked lightning into the office, fraying all of the servers and computers in the office. The fulminous aether greedily leaping from machine to machine, as Ruslov's will and mastery guided the flows. Ruslov nodded and turned to the agents, who stood wide-eyed at the display of alchemic might. As I said, Agent, whatever works. We should go. Agent Dumorn snapped out of his trance and nodded, flicked the switch at the top of the cylinder on the display, said 0:15. He turned the top a full 36 degrees as the safety seal clicked. He tossed the device forward and waved them back to the doors. Move, people, let's go. The 3 Foundation personnel slipped back through the portal to Earth. The 5 of them ran down the hallway, sprinting for the far side of the building. Agent Dumorn waving at his people in the hallway, one bleeding from a wound in his arm. Several stoning bodies had joined the first, and the other agents were nowhere to be found. Move, sliders going off in 10. The agent broke into a limping run as he cleared the far side and took shelter behind the columns leading to a side corridor. The rest of the agents ducked through the corner and huddled together. The agents ducked and covered as Ruslov stood, condensing the aethers around the gathered personnel in a near impenetrable shield of air and gravity. Several seconds ticked by, and the building was rocked by a shock wave as the tiny, ultra-compact plastic explosives detonated on the far side of the portal. The explosion raced along the office towards the assembled team. The moment it touched the threshold of the portal collapsed, leaving nothing but a smoking set of shattered glass doors leading to an empty and unoccupied office space. Ruslov dropped the shield and relaxed, cocking his head to one side. Well, anticlimactic, but I'll take it. Captain, if you could radio our exit. Ruslov walked over to the panel and clicked the elevator call button. Agent Dumorn blinked a few times and shook his head, getting into the team downstairs to prepare extraction. Director, one question? Ruslov nodded. What is it? Agent Dumorn thumbed back at the assembled agents. That shield could have protected us. Why did we break for cover? Ruslov shrugged and smiled slightly. Oh, it wouldn't have. We probably would have been smeared to paste. Agent Dumorn's mouth fell open and he leaned in. Then why the hell did you even put up that shield to begin with? Rosov walked past Agent Moore and into the elevator, waiting for him and his team to get in. It made you feel better, yes? Agent Captain Agent Moore stared for a moment, unsure if he should be angry or amused. Alchemists are weird, he thought to himself as he boarded the elevator, descending towards their extraction vehicle on the streets below. Tell me again where you found this thing. Dr. De La Vega held up the containment cube in the intake wing of Site 72. Flea market. I got lucky. Walked past the stall wearing a thermic ring. I think I had it on after the mission in Java. Started buzzing like crazy, and I picked it up immediately. Agent Morse steeped his fingers and rested his chin on the intertwining digits. Dr. De La Vega frowned and placed the cube back down on the table. And where did the seller claim he got it? Agent Morse shrugged. As I said before, he claimed his grandfather found it in some tomb in China. He was just hawking it for extra cash. I didn't ask too many questions. I figure that's more I and the A's shtick. I slapped it in the cube and brought it back to the site. The only thing he told me was, don't wear it. Dr. De La Vega looked Captain Agent Moore in the eyes and shook his head. Fine, fine. We'll do a proper investigation once we figure out what it is. Agent Moore nodded and stood, exiting the intake lab and heading towards the barracks. He tapped a few buttons on his watch and made a call. Director? Yes, sir. Level 4 as requested. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sometimes the information we redact has nothing to do with need to know or protect the world or something so grand. Sometimes we're just covering up the mistakes of the past. Galao was a mistake. I shouldn't have let Flamel do that to him. And Quincy, maybe they were evil. But even evil deserves mercy, eventually. Excerpt Personal Log of Director Diaghilev, January 2018. And that was an alchemist goes to war. I'll be back very soon, just gotta let my voice rest, and then I'll finish up this series. Speak with you very soon. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Alright, ready to move on to the final story for this tale. The Summer of Bad Memories. Win some, lose some. But when you lose, sometimes you lose bad. By Dr. Magnus. The Summer of Bad Memories. In hindsight, it should have been obvious. All the signs were there. Unfortunately, hindsight is not the same as foresight. I'm just sorry that I was not the one who paid the price in the Summer of Bad Memories. Excerpt Personal Journal of Ruslav Diaghilev, 2018. Ruslav Diaghilev ran through the crowded market in the twisting streets of Alagada. Adabeo trailing behind him. Both elder alchemists had croziers drawn and deflecting the blasts of alternating gravel and lightning from the two figures in front of them. Vendors and citizens jumped out of the way as the figures rampaging through the crowded stalls. The citizens of the city jumped out of the way of the blasting elements. The blast of elemental forces the alchemists hurled at each other. Bolsimoi, Ladabeo, can you slow them down? I can't let down my counterflows, Ruslav yelled, the aether flows around his feet drawing up sparks from the stones on the ground, augmenting his movement. With each pad on his feet on the ground, the earth pushed back up with him against his distinctive purple shoes, propelling him forward. On this plane, the Great Seal had significantly less effect than on their home plane. Aether flowed around and through them like water. Arabeo's teeth stood out from his dark skin. Yes, Grapefruit. I'll see you in a moment. Arbeo let out a whooping yell, calling out to the animalistic aether of life and blood. With a bounding leap, the elder took flight on spiritual hawk wings from his shoulders. Ruslav couldn't help but marvel at his friend employing his full strength, no longer limited by the seal they had placed upon their own reality. He had never caught the knack for the aethers of life, but Arabeo made it look easy. His eyes turned back to their quarry as his friend soared above them, hurling gouts of water which turned to ice beneath their feet. The two Algadanes took turns twisting around and hurling bolts, gouts, and chunks of various elements, attempting to knock Arabeo out of the sky or disrupt the masterful workings around his back. Their robes flipped back, revealing one had to have a scale-covered sphere for a head, and the other a collection of shifting chunks of flesh in the shape of a humanoid. He banked left and right, easily dodging their counterflows, but not trying to deflect them. He laughed almost contemplatively as they continued to try and hit him with slow-moving projectiles, nearly tripping over every stall and stand. The two native Algadans were out of place here in the city of ever-grinding salts. Arabeo was tracking a series of money transfers from Leninov Technologies to a shell company that was owned by De Corso Associations. De Corso was a famous alchemist in his own right, but always lived in Alagadad since as long as either elder could recall, and had never held any business ventures in their plane. Their search had eventually led to the pair of journeyman alchemists fleeing from them. Adabeo let out a thunderous yell, clashing down a few feet in front of the two fleeing Algadans. Their appendages their appendages backpedaling as they tried to escape the wrath of the elder alchemist. With the blessing of water, he boomed, gathering a veritable typhoon of aqueous aether around him, manifesting in heavy swirls around the bald alchemist. Balls of ice, swirling mists, and miniature waterspouts circled the street, blocking the way. Carts and stalls went flying before the fury of summoned air and ice. I do not suggest you attempt to pass me. You will not enjoy the results. Far behind, a young man struggled to keep up. His breath labored as Otaro was overwhelmed with the sight, sounds, and smells and flows of the place. He couldn't believe how much aether swirled around them. He was having trouble just keeping his eyes focused on the flowing green robes in front of him. The director was covering ground at a breakneck pace from the working around his feet. Arturo Janumo saw a flash of green and blue and felt the distinct crack of Adabeo's alchemy, manifesting what he felt to him like a blinding glare of the aqueous aether. The two Alagadans, to their credit, froze in their tracks. They threw down the sinuous croziers favored by their master, and lifted their gnarled hands in a gesture of surrender. Elder, please don't harm us. I surrender, the scale-covered one alchemist said. Ruzov caught up with a heavy pant as the fleshy Algadan muttered his surrender. Thank you, Arabeo. That was an oppressive flow. Around them, the multitudinous shapes of the citizens of Algada screamed and ran in panic. Displays of alchemy of this level were few and far between, but always meant trouble. In the corner, an old man who looked like he was made of knotted rags twisted over each other, muttered, Thrice damned alchemists, always mucking up market day. He picked up the glittering pennants that had been knocked to the floor in the hubbub and shuffled off, cursing the entire time. Adabeo smiled and let the waters recede, flowing a bit around his hands, hardening it to a pair of icy manacles for each of the Alagadans. It was nothing grapefruit. I rarely get a chance to cut loose like this. I enjoyed myself. Arturo caught up a moment later, panting and doubling over. Senora Crystal, I'm here. I'm sorry, elders. The four alchemists looked at the sweat-stricken young man. The two Algadans grinning sheepishly. Apprentice? The fleshly alchemist asked. Uzlov's hand streaked out, covered in crackling electricity, knocking the slimy Algadan out cold. Duh. Also should have said earlier, don't speak, or I'll shock you out. Uzlov looked down at the convulsing form of the young alchemist. Apologies for not saying it sooner. Adabeo grinned and moved towards Arturo. Why don't you and the director take our guest back to the site for containment and questioning? I have a few things to wrap up here before I head back. Otto attempted to answer back, still panting with lost breath, before holding up a thumb, nodding. He looked up at the director with a questioning look. The old archivist chuckled. Duh, let's go back. I need to teach you to keep up with us old men. Otto, he grasped Otto by the shoulder in one hand, and the two Alagadeans by the shoulders of their robes in either heavy-knuckled hand. Come on, gentlemen. I know you're a young researcher who would be fascinated to meet you. Adabel watched as the elder and apprentice walked towards a nearby doorway. Ruzlov gesturing a portal back to the side open with his chin. The director and the younger alchemist walked through the ragged-edged portal, which closed behind them. Adabel reached down to his pocket to make sure he had the gemstones he needed to acquire the goods he had in mind. He turned to set off down an alleyway towards his favorite local eatery, before a tap alighted upon his shoulder. Perplexed, Adabel turned, coming face to face with the ugly, scar-ridden face of a man he recognized. Ledenov? He managed to get out before the darkness rose, and he remembered nothing more. A vessel is anything that can hold, in a stable fashion, the etheric pattern an alchemist imprints on it. It could be a protective working, some kind of long-lasting flow, or even memories. Some say that with enough power and study, an entire personality could be transferred to a substitute or a suitable object. Unfortunately, such objects would need to be significantly more complex than anything produced by humanity. The theoretical application of Takwin is a particularly artistic implementation of a vessel. To date, no alchemist has successfully created Takwin, but someday. Excerpt: A study on the uses of alchemy. Elder Trismegistus, 1147. 16 hours later, Ruzlov grimaced, holding up the report on the skip. Are you sure he's being held here? He let the sheet of paper fall to the desk, around the wide table where we're gathering the three command members of his personal MTF, the Oath Keepers. We're Sir Director. All of our intelligence we recovered from the two prisoners points to this slab being where they're keeping Elder Aldebayo. Agent Morin's eyes drifted into those of the director. Are you sure this is a good idea? Storming an empty office got one of my agents sidelined. They still don't know when she's going to wake up. This time, we may not be so lucky. All the recon we've got indicates this lab has a non-insignificant security force. Ruzlov made a silencing gesture with his hands. Immaterial. What kind of force are we dealing with? Agent Dumorn opened the laptop in front of him, plugging it into the display built into the table. A map of the facility showed up on the screen, in the middle of the table. If it were me, I'd place heavy guard points in this junctions. Summers isn't stupid, and we're not sure exactly what he's capable of. Initial readings from the DG apparatus are showing at least 7.2 on the baseline aether levels. That's practically singing, right? It does not matter. Requisitioning the heavy weapons and armor. Meet me in the strike bay in 40. Use my authority to acquire whatever you feel is necessary to reduce this place to a stain on the earth. Uzlov replied, his eyes distant. Ancient Morn paused a moment before nodding. Guthrie, you're with me. Tell the agents it's Christmas, courtesy of the director. Move out. The command group for the Oath Keepers filed out of the room. Uzlov worked straw for a moment before ejecting the smart tab from the dock. I will bring the wrath of the Luna down. It's safe. I will bring down the wrath of the Luna itself if he's harmed you. I swear this by fire and fury. The director stormed out, a tight knot of tension growing between his shoulders. The door hissed shut behind him, leaving the room in the bowels of Site 17, humming with the unusual background noise of power and ventilation. 6 minutes passed in relative silence. A quiet warbling sound escaped from the area just beside where Ruslan had stood. A shimmering portal winked to life, belching out a heavy-set but attractive man in his 40s. Mike Summers wore a pair of khaki pants, a heavy-grade bulletproof vest, and combat helmet. In his hands was a compact combat shotgun, and his bright pink polo shirt stood out garishly from the drab gray of his combat armor. He reached back through the portal and waved. 12 more figures joined him in the confines of one of the operations room. They moved with unnatural coordination. None of them spoke, each of them armed with a different variety of firearm. There were no nameplates on their combat gear. 4 of the assembled assault force walked over to the door, leveling a weapon at it. The 2 in front dropped to a knee. Mike Summers did a quick scan of the room and reached through the portal one more time. A heavy quartz and pig iron crozier gripped by a thin and liver-spotted hand emerged from the glowing edifice. Karl Leninov stepped into the operations room, looking around with his good eye, the heavy scarring over his left making the side of his face a useless mass. He lifted the twisted crozier and concentrated the air around him, darkening slightly. It's here. It's definitely here. Down several fathoms at least. At least that thrice damned diaglyph is gone. Carl stumped around the room, examining the technology with a critical eye. Useless junk. He swiped a hand through the air and twisted the fulminous aethers to his will, frying the delicate electronics with random explosions of sparks. You sure you don't want to set a set of armor, Mr. Leninov? Mike offered cheerfully, his compact shotgun trained at the door. I'd rather not have you caught catching a stray bullet. Rizov pushed Summers out of the way of the door dismissively. No, and do not make such foolish suggestions again. I hold no fear for simple bullets. Let's move. His little pet foundation will detect our presence soon. The assault force eased the door open. the lead man glancing out to the hallway, checking both sides. He indicated to move forward, and the team filed out. 6 ahead and 6 behind. The polo and rope-clad duo. One of the group spotted a staircase sign at the T intersection. The main man gestured to go straight and turn a corner to check for hostiles. They coming face to face with a researcher with a folder in his hands. He glanced up across their glasses, eyes half glazed. He took in the intruders in gray fatigues, leveled a silenced weapon at them as his eyes shot open. "You're not supposed to be here," the reacher squeaked down, frozen in panic. Without hesitation, the lead assault force member let loose a half-dozen shots into them, turning his coat into a bloody pulp. He was dead before they hit the ground. The ballpoint he'd been chewing on hitting the ground a fraction of a second after them. Mike padded out from the group, looking around. "That's gotta get their attention. We gotta go." He gestured towards the stairway door. Carl walked out from the group and stood over the bloody corpse of the researcher they just murdered. He muttered something under his breath, invoking the third language. The concrete of the floor winged open and swallowed the blood and corpse left behind. Mike kicked in the spent brass from the mercenary's gun after them, and Carl closed the hole. "Let's go. No evidence. They can't know it was us." He stomped off to the staircase door and pushed it open with his crozier. "Come on, we don't have all day." The dozen mercenaries filed into the staircase, Mike and Carl taking up the middle one more. The group descended level by level, Carl checking for the feeling of their target each time. After 4 levels, he grunted and said, "Here, it's here." The dim lighting in the staircase reflected off the visors of the mercenaries' full-faced helmets. They'd been expensive, but good help was invaluable in situations like this. The lead mercenary nodded and opened the door. He stepped out into the hallway and swept his gun from right to left. He took 2 steps to the hallway and jerked violently to the right. His helmet a bloom of tortured metal and wet skull fragments. The merc's blood glowed a dull green under the hallway lights. Mike pushed Carl back into the corner of the staircase, out of line of sight of the door. "Jesus Christ, get back!" shouted from down the hallway, veiled into the small stairwell, as well as from above them. "Well, shit. I think we're cut off. Any ideas, Carl?" Leonov just barely reacted to all this, his gaze elsewhere. "Yes, Summers. For one, shut up, and stop giving away our position. Let the mercenaries do their job, idiot. Our target is 15 meters down the hall, past whatever just killed Compatrion. Or killed our compatriot. We're not leaving without it." Mike grimaced and looked up, trying to judge how far away the enemy force was. "Can you get us out once we have it?" Carl slapped Mike across the jaw hard. His hand left small abrasions from the ice crystals he summoned from the surrounding water vapor. Of course I can. Why would you ask such a dumb question? Just do as you're told. Mike worked his jaw and looked down. Yes, sir. Alright. You five out in the hallway. Figure out what that was. The five figures nodded in unison and crouched low. The lead figure gave a slow 3 count with his fingers, then rolled out in the hallway, followed by the two in a low crouch, and one in prone position. The remaining two leaned out over the prone man to look down the hallway. 2 Foundation agents manned a security checkpoint just behind a heavily armored door. They leveled large caliber rifles down at the invading force. A hail of bullets spat out at the mercenaries, clipping the lead figure in the shoulder and sending him to the floor. Another was hit in the stomach, but barely reacted. Gouts of dark green ichor oozing from the wound. The other 4 figures fired in unison, turning the security station to ribbons. The 2 agents fell to the ground, bleeding from a half a dozen wounds each. Behind them, Carl looked up at the staircase, made a snatching motion, invoking Turonus Aethers. The walls groaned and extended outwards, chunks of rotting concrete intermixed. He had cut off any hope of Foundation reinforcements from above, on this staircase at least. From the hallway, a not quite human voice eked out of the now lead figure's helmet. Clear. Carl and Mike walked into the adjoining hallway and patted down to the heavily armored door. This is it, Carl said. The signs above the door read, High Security Storage. Carl looked at the door critically and gestured to the figures. Explosives. One of them stepped forward and handed Carl a string of dead cards. He peeled the film off of the sticky portion and stuck it against the hinges of the door. From the other end of the hallway, footsteps started to echo through the hallways. Mike turned and looked down at the remaining mercenaries. Hold them off. We're going in. The figures nodded in unison and strode off, taking a defensive position within the stairwell and around a nearby corner. Carl pushed Mike back a few feet and held up a hand, summoning more stones from the ground and walls to create an impromptu barrier between them and the door. Carl pressed the button on the attached detonator, and a hollow boom shook the hallway. The stones in front of them crumbled from the explosion, but did not fly backwards into the pair. Carl hobbled over to the rubble and facing the door. Mike looked down the hallway, grimacing. 2 more of the mercenaries had been shredded by the explosion, and they were now holding off more Foundation security. Carl ignored them and started towards the door. Let's go, Summers. We don't have. Mike finally tore his gaze from the mangled bodies and said, They're not going to last long. We have to hurt. Carl spun around towards Mike and slammed his crow's ear into his knee. It broke with a sickly crunch. Mike screamed in agony, falling to the floor and clutching his ruined knee. Carl bellowed at the prone man. Do not ever interrupt me again. Do not ever tell me what to do. Respect your master. He panted for several moments, bullets starting to zip past the rapidly shrinking mercenary force they brought. Get inside, you stupid oaf. If you do not, I will not heal you this time. Mike managed to 3-limb crawl, drag himself to the storage space, wishing for the thousandth time he'd never met Karl Lindenhoff. He'd been injured more by the insane alchemist than he'd ever thought possible. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. Karl waved dismissively at the prone figure, furking the aqueous aethers, and strode into the storage room. A shower of water landing over Mike's ruined knee, painfully knitting the flesh back together. Mike rose shakily to his knee as the sounds of combat intensified. He almost asked Karl to hurry again before biting back the thought. The room was filled with dozens and dozens of storage lockers. Each locker held some object with a neat description and a reference code. Some of them were the size of a bread box. Others were from floor to ceiling. Karl walked past 2 rows of objects before settling on a large storage locker with the number 2522. He smiled a crooked tooth smile and set his hand on the lock pad, summoning more of the fulminous aether. It smoked and the door clicked open, revealing the contents. Mike Summers hobbled over to Karl, still shaky on his rapidly healed knee. What is it? Karl Leonov reached forward and pressed his hand against the chassis of the object in front of him, gently filling it with enough power from the fulminous aether to turn it on. The LED is on its chest and status panel flickered to life as a low hum issued from the anti-gravity generator on the bottom. A vessel, Summers. This is the thing we made all the Quasturas nodes found for us. The perfect vessel. One of the machine's hands reached down and picked up the discarded hat on the ground, placing it upon its head. From its voice box, a hissing sound issued forth, which slowly snapped into focus. A single line came out as recognizable English. Fuck trees, I climb clouds, motherfucker. Karl turned and his grin widened into a rictus of election. He gestured and the portal opened into an unknown plane. He quickly stumped through, followed by the floating form of former SCP-522. SCP-2522. Mike Summers hesitated for a moment as the bullet stopped flying towards the room. He weighed his options for a moment more, then dashed through the portal. It winked out of existence behind them, leaving the high-security storage room silenced from their presence. Agents Sam Denton and Jim McDowell slipped into the high-security storage rooms moments after Karl and Mike dissipated, clearing the shelves one by one with their weapons drawn. Agent Denton walked his way down to the broken locker, shouting, "Clear! I've got something over here." Jim strode up to his partner and closed the door, looking at the destination. 2522. Which one was that? Sam paled, pulling out his phone and dialing the local Foundation operative. "Get me a priority line to Dr. Mann." "We are the stewards of a great power. With that comes the greatest of responsibilities. Control and discipline. Unfortunately, there will always be those that abuse their powers, political, personal, or even alchemic. All we can do is to oppose those who would abuse such gifts. Excerpt Meditations Unabridged. Marcus Aurelius. Copy stored in the former library of the College of Alchemists. Pre-editing for public dissemination. Elsewhere, Director Diaglyph swung his crozier, an explosive combustion of earth, fire, and frost, blowing the vault door from its hinges from the inside. The multi-ton door soared past him and over the head of Agent Demore. He stepped through, blood streaming down from the cut above his right eye, scanning for threats. Behind him, Agent Demore padded, a heavy strip of duct tape around his thigh, covering a wound in a makeshift compress bandage. Sir, slow down. We left the entire team behind. I can't guarantee your safety. Ruzlov slashed the air, the dull crackling of thunder audible in the gesture. Safety not important. Can take care of myself. We must find him. Ruzlov walked through the spacious laboratory, sensing his friend's etheric flows weakening. He walked with purpose through the banks of lab equipment, all gleaming steel and matte plastics. Dozens of banks of computers, rows of beakers and creatures in cages dotted the shelves and countertops of the ground floor of the laboratory. The laboratory itself was massive, with multiple levels of catwalks and support struts holding up the heavier equipment above them. He disruptively looked up and spotted a dark-skinned figure strapped to a harness of tubes and machinery on the topmost catwalk of the cavernous building. Around him, several smaller figures worked, adjusting dials and knobs on the outside of the apparatus. Ruzlov made a beckoning gesture and invoked the ethers of earth and electricity, generating a magnetic field directly in front of him. With an invocation of the Furious Aether, the support struts for the machine snapped, the magnetic field gently lowering the apparatus to the floor. The three people working on the machine fell from the catwalk towards the ground. Ruzlov gestured again, invoking the tenebrous aether to increase the gravity field around their descent, slamming them to the ground as if they were on Jupiter. The result was messy. Agent Demore gaped at the carnage the director had wrought. His stomach turned slightly. He jogged up to catch with the elder, keeping his weapon leveled at the best he could. Inside the apparatus, Adebayo was strapped to a crude table upright. Lights had been attached to his skin, and several tubes had been threaded into his chest. Bright fluids filled into his body, which had emaciated to near skeletal proportions. A dull groan escaped his champed lips as Ruzlov rushed to the pod. Adebayo, friend. Please, come on, wake up. Ruzlov's eyes blurred slightly, summoning water to his hands, invoking the aqueous aethers. He imbued the liquid with as much energy as he could, trying to encourage it to heal his friend. Adebayo sipped the liquid and smiled slightly, fresh blood flowing from cracks in his skin. Grapefruit, you're here. Ruzlov nodded, panting slightly. I'm here. I've got you. I'll get you fixed up in a moment. Hold on. He summoned the aqueous aether around his frame, invoking the healing energies of water. He added a fluid, tenuous aether to it, pushing more energy out. Adebayo shook his head weakly. Grapefoot, no. He gestured as best as he could to the tubes pushing liquids between his ribs. They've been tubing Alchemy blood into me for hours. Rizov's eyes went wide and his mouth opened slightly. Etheric poisoning? No. But it won't. Adebayo grimaced in pain. This was a trap, Grapefoot. He's after a vessel. It's at the site. He used me to find your etheric signature. The moment you weren't there to stop him, he left. Ruslan's face went blank, attempting to process the information that Adebayo presented him with. A vessel? For what? Adebayo shook in another pained breath and started to speak, but it was too much. His last breath shook out of him, and he hung his head, finally free of the mortal shackle he had held for the past 700 years. Elder Adebayo Nakadami passed out of this world, witnessed by an elder and a layman. No. Adebayo, no. You're not. No. Ruzov's voice was a cracked murmur, barely above a whisper. He looked down at the slack face in his hands, trying in vain to revive his friend. Ruzov fell to his knee, his hands on the floor. He clamped his eyes shut, letting out a frustrated bellow of grief. The flows around him grew chaotic, his control slipping and his grief flashing out at the forces surrounding them. The very bones of the earth shook with his fury as lightning raged overhead. The storm winds tearing out off the roof of the facility. A torrential rain began to fall, soaking the more Ruzlov and the body of Adebayo to the bone. The local gravity field started to slightly warp at random. Agent Moore struggled against the forces flowing out of the director. I slapped a hand on the back of his shoulder. Director, calm down. You're tearing this place apart. Ruzlov took a shaky breath, asserting control over his etheric flow, and more importantly, his emotions, calming the core of alchemic might inside of him that he had nearly let loose. The storm calmed and left the two men standing in the ruins of the facility. The rest of the Oath Keepers finally caught up to them and stood in a rough semicircle around Dumorn. He reached up and spoke into his radio, contacting with Foundation Command. We need an extraction. 20+1. He paused for a moment, listening to the response. 20+1. And a body bag. Mission failed. Ruzlov buried his face in his hands, weeping for a remarkable soul. I asked him, Master, what is it like when you lose control of your power? After the usual curses and invectives, Carl looked at me and said, I can shake the very heavens with my fury, and if you do not clean out the earth, you'll feel it in the back of my hand. Carl was not a particularly kind teacher, but he taught me quite a bit about human nature in the end. Significantly more than he knew, ironically enough. Excerpt Ruzlov Diaghilev, A Remarkable Life, Volume 1, Arturo Gionomo, 2031. And that brings us to the end of this tale, of this series. Next week I will be starting with hold on, the tale series for Paratech and Partnership. And the first tale will be A Small Town Problems. But man, that was a heavy one. It was really good. So, until next time, everyone have a wonderful week.